It's no secret that Disney often bows to China, even in the face of human rights violations. We told you when the company defended filming the live-action Mulan in Xinjiang, the province in China, where an unknown number of Uyghur Muslims have been detained.
Just an unbelievable story. Here to dig into the relationship between Hollywood and China is Chris Fenton, a Hollywood executive. He's also the author of a great book. I highly recommend it, Feeding the Dragon, Inside the Trillion-Dollar Dilemma, Facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American Business. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you both for having me on. And Emily, thank you so much for covering this topic for so long, too. I feel like we've been in the trenches on this for a long time together.
Well, absolutely. And what Chris is getting at there is he has acted as a whistleblower. His book, the reason I say it's so great is that it does peel back the curtain on what was happening between some of these major film studios, which are attached to major corporations, and the Chinese government, and how that was affecting actually the art that was coming out of Hollywood, and in that way affecting our politics. So, Chris, if you could just give us a little bit of background on your experience. What were you doing for DMG Studios when you were distributing films like Iron Man 3 in China to help those studios make money through the Chinese market, making lots of money because so many Chinese people love American movies. They love to go to the movie theater. What were you doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't really see myself as a whistleblower per se, because I actually I am very complicit in what was happening as a cog in the wheel in this machine. And then on top of it, I'm trying to put forward some ideas for constructive measures to solve this problem. But to answer your question, I mean, if you look behind me, you see the Looper poster in Chinese, you see the Iron Man 3 poster in Chinese. One of the things when you're selling products or services into the China market is there's two entities you have to sell to. Number one is the Chinese government. If you can't get the Chinese government to sign off and approve why your product and service should be in that market, then you're dead on arrival. So one of the things you need to do is obviously placate them. And one of their biggest issues is how do you keep 1.4 billion people just happy enough that they don't revolt, and also fully respecting the fact that they think they have the greatest government in the world. If you can get past that entity and get that approval, then you're actually finally able to sell to their consumer market, which is the largest in the world.
And so what specifically have you seen happen to the product that Americans are selling in China in order to conform to those expectations?
Well, let's take Looper, for example, right? In order to make the Chinese government feel that you're providing them the ammo to make them look great to their 1.4 billion people of their populace, you need to showcase the country in a way that creates tremendous nationalistic pride. So in Looper, we actually took a story that was supposed to take place in France in the future, and we actually replaced the future location to that of China. And not only did we replace the location to China, but we also showcased Shanghai as the absolute mecca, the absolute technology center of the world by providing them all kinds of designs. And this was the Shanghai municipal government as well as the central government of China. All these different ideas of how that landscape, how that skyline was going to work. And we worked with them to create the ultimate backdrop for where Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis actually acted in. And it created all kinds of nationalistic pride around the fact that the movie was showcasing China as the place in the future where everyone wanted to live. And because of that, China gave us, the Chinese government gave us full access to market and promote the movie and distribute it there, and became a top 10 film that particular year in 2012.
Yeah, and Chris also has a story about World War Z in his book that's particularly interesting as well. And Chris, someone you've worked with, Judd Apatow, is one of the very few people, very, very few people in Hollywood who's willing to stand up and say, listen, we have to stop doing some of this nonsense. Where there isn't, where that doesn't exist, that sentiment doesn't exist, is Disney. I mean, one of the biggest corporations, a growing corporation in the world. You were talking to the Hollywood Reporter just late last month, and you said Disney should have the ability to say, we don't stand for what's happening in the Xinjiang province, and they shouldn't be able to make that statement without fearing that their theme park's going to get shut down. This is becoming a huge problem for Disney because they have Chloe Zhao directing Eternals, which is going to be a big, I mean, that's a high budget production. Disney spent a lot of money to make that movie. They want it to do really well in China. But Chloe Zhao has a problem because she gave an interview to a tiny little independent film outlet 10 years ago, saying that when she was growing up in China, there were lies everywhere. Disney publicists are reportedly already pressuring all kinds of news media outlets to change past coverage or to change present and future coverage. What on earth is Disney going to do about the Eternals, and how is this particular case study going to affect Disney's relationship with China and the American government's relationship with Disney?
Yeah, well, there's so many layers to that question. I mean, first of all, in the Mulan situation, as you know, they thanked Xinjiang province officials for providing location access to shoot part of Mulan. That's really par for the course. It happens in all movies that are particularly shooting in China. That's just done. But the oversight of who they were thanking was obviously completely misguided, and they got caught thanking, obviously, people that shouldn't have been thanked.
But
and what
defended
Disney
it.
did. Well, and what Disney did to essentially react to it is what all corporations do, which is put their head in the sand and essentially remain crickets on the issue and hope the news cycle moves past. Now, during that time, we actually saw Disney lose its expansion rights to the Hong Kong theme park, which they intended to expand the footprint of that theme park because it had been doing well. So we saw a reaction from the CCP that was very negative on it. Then we also saw politicians and journalists and critics pick up on it here and say, hey, why are you staying so quiet on the issue? Now, my feeling is that you can't just tell Disney, oh, go fix what's happening in Xinjiang. You can't provide that North Star as sort of their activist move. But what you can say to Disney as a pillar of free speech and creativity is to speak up on the issue and say, hey, we don't condone what is happening there in Xinjiang at all. And we are sorry for what we did and will never happen again. But they can't even do that here in Burbank, California, where we have the freedom of speech rights that Americans hold near and dear. We need to protect that ability. We need to have the ability to criticize China when we don't like what's happening over there. And right now, we are completely muted. The government needs to get behind this and enforce the fact that we need to provide leverage for these companies to speak up. Otherwise, they're going to get retaliation effect from consumers in the Western world, which is going to hit their pocketbooks just as hard as losing China.
And Chris, as you say, they don't even do it in movies that they don't want to release to China because the threat of blacklisting is so strong. Just a quick question on this point, and then I'll toss to Ryan. Will the CCP let Eternals, it's hard to say right now, but this is the big ongoing question. Will the CCP let Eternals be released in China?
Well, that's a big question. I can't say what's in the CCP's mind, nor can anyone. But if you look at it in the most abstract, 1.4 billion people just happy enough that they don't revolt. They have to have a pride in their government. They saw this woman, Chloe Zhao, go off on the global stage and win the most prized award possible. And now she continues to live in the Western world. She continues to live in Ojai, California. That is a loss of face for the Chinese Communist Party. They want the Yao Ming effect. They want the Yao Ming who goes off, becomes one of the greatest NBA players of all time, then goes back to the homeland. I believe they're looking for Chloe to do the exact same. And until she does that, I think Disney and Chloe will have a real problem in that market.
Chris, I wanted to get your reaction to there's an element of left-wing criticism that will arise, and you can probably read it in the comment section of this video, that will say, look, by even leveling a lot of these criticisms, all you're doing is doing the bidding of American imperialism, and that you're heightening nationalism in both countries, which is increasing the likelihood of a clash. What's your reaction to that type of criticism?
Well, I have a real problem with the criticism in general because it's so politicized. I mean, if we're going to tackle the China challenge, we have to have a united nation, and that means red and blue. And I think one of the greatest things about China is it provides this common challenge that can unite a very divided country. It's economic security issues, it's national security issues. By the way, you talk about the left. freedom of speech issues, human rights issues. There are a lot of issues that Americans of all walks of life can unite on together in this case. It's not taking a lot of this cultural warfare or the issues that are dividing our country. It's taking ones that are really inherent to being American and being human. So I feel like there's a real opportunity here to get both left and right on the same focus and actually say, hey, let's protect what's important to Americans. Let's protect what's important to our Western allies. Forget this imperialism and all kinds of other stuff. We're not trying to force something on the Chinese. We're actually just trying to push back the Chinese on encroachment that goes beyond their borders, right? This is not about censorship within their country. This is propaganda and censorship outside of their borders. And that is something that is not imperialistic. That is not going back to, oh, let's rule the world. This is about getting back on our homeland what we had in the first place.
So let's actually roll the clip. I want to get you to respond to the memorable clip of John Cena apologizing to his Chinese fans for referring to Taiwan as a country.
你好，中国，这是叫西娜。我必须说，现在，在速度与激情中，我做很多采访，很多，所以在一个采访，我有一个错误，所有人问我，如果我可以用中文，速度与激情中人给我很多资讯 information。所以很多采访，很多 information，我有一个错误。
Okay, so a lot of people were probably surprised actually to learn that John Cena was fluent in Mandarin. And that's actually kind of more interesting than the apology itself. Why? Obviously, he has personal business reasons to be fluent in Mandarin. He's been studying it for years. This has been going on behind the scenes for years. He didn't just suddenly become fluent in Mandarin recently. And the nature of that apology, Chris, I want to ask you about as someone who's dealt with a lot of people in the business sector in China. That was a groveling apology. That just wasn't, oh, I'm sorry. It was, I'm sorry. And why do you think John Cena felt the need to say he was sorry, 2,000 times? What does that mean? What signal is he trying to send to China with an apology of that nature?
Well, it's cringeworthy for sure. I mean, in fact, if you look behind me, I have a Blockers poster up there. Yes. I worked with John Cena. I'm actually a big fan of his, and he's a really, really talented and good person. He's interesting, too, because both the left and right have been fans of his, whether it's on the wrestling side of things, whether it's on the acting or comedic side of things. So he has a very large audience here in the United States and around the world. His speaking of Mandarin has gone back 10 years. He's been working on it mainly because wrestling is making big strides into getting into that market, and he knew that was a really smart way to build his profile and brand there. And then obviously he's an action star, and Fast and Furious is a huge franchise when it comes to China. What's interesting, though, is that F9 was supposed to do at least $400 million in the market. It's going to top out around $200 million. And this controversy is a big reason why. Now, one of the things I would offer to be constructive to John Cena is I think, A, he's got a huge platform, both left and right, as we spoke about. And I think he could take this moment where it's literally a no-win situation. So he has nothing to lose. He's going to lose a market overseas in the West or lose a market in China by pulling this kind of thing. I think he could lead and say, I am going to be a global activist on this issue. And he actually can take on that Muhammad Ali effect, that brand that goes beyond what he does in entertainment, and actually add a zero to his checking account in the process of doing what's right for the world.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Humble and honored. Come back anytime.
You got it. So stick with us. More Rising for you coming up.